everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Lena. You guys really enjoyed my video from a few weeks ago, how to pack light for a weekend getaway. I'll leave it up here if you haven't seen it yet, but you guys really liked that video, so I thought I would do another travel tip video. This week, we are gonna talk about if budget airlines are right for you. I know that there's a lot of varying opinions about budget airlines, so I thought I would talk to you about my experiences and whether I think, based on your trip, based on your family, based on a whole number of different factors, if that type of travel is right for you. So let's start off by kind of discussing and breaking down what budget airlines are. Obviously, by the word budget, you know it's going to be cheap, and by airlines, it's flying, it's air travel. So the way budget airlines work is you have a base fare, and then everything on top of that is an additional cost. Every amenity that you typically get with travel costs a little bit extra. So picking your seat, change fees, luggage, food on the airline, everything aside from your seat costs extra. Sounds a little scary and a little bit like a scam. It's not, I promise. I fly budget all the time. That's essentially what budget airline is. I do want to clarify for the purpose of this video, Southwest is not a budget airline. They do things a little bit differently. At one point, they used to be considered budget, but as they've grown in popularity and as other budget airlines have also grown in popularity, I would say Southwest is more mid-level, because what you see is what you get. You still get the snacks, you get the checked luggage, and honestly, their pricing isn't that much lower than United, Delta, whatever. I digress. I fly, like I said, I fly budget all the time. If you've watched any of my vlogs, I'm normally flying budget, especially for these quick trips. I'm a recent college graduate on a budget, so budget airlines are great for me, especially when I'm flying from Columbus to Orlando fairly regularly. Just last year, I flew both Frontier and Spirit. Those are the two I have experience with and we'll be talking about. But then there's also JetBlue, there's Allegiant, there's a few others throughout the country. Things to consider when you choose to fly these airlines. So there's unfortunately only one pro to budget airlines. That it's budget, it's cheap. You can get round trip tickets for, I paid 30 bucks round trip for a flight last year. Now that's gonna change with the economy and with travel increasing, now that we're seeing an end to COVID, now that restrictions are loosening. You're not gonna get it as cheap as $30 round trip, but it's budget. It's really cheap, it's really good for your pocket. If you're going to Orlando like I do regularly and you're paying big bucks for an awesome Disney trip, flying budget's a really good way to cut costs, and instead of spending $800 round trip, you spend $400 round trip. So unfortunately, that is the only pro to budget airlines. So I am not gonna sit here and slam budget airlines, but we are gonna go through and talk about the cons, because that's something to think about as you are booking your flights. The first and obvious one is that each amenity comes at an additional cost. If you want to pick your seat, you're gonna pay extra. If you want some food or drinks on your flight, even non-alcoholic, even a bottle of water, you're gonna have to pay for it. If you need to change your flight, they're gonna make it difficult on you. I've run into some problems with that. I will share my horror stories, but they're really not that scary. So just things for you to keep in mind. Budget airlines do pack a lot of seats into a small space. So if you're tall like I am, I'm 5'9", I'm the shortest in my family. My brother is 6'3", probably 6'4" at this point. There's very little leg room. I have to man spread to feel comfortable on the flight. Just something to consider. I will circle back to that with a point at the end of the video. What we experienced on our most recent trip to Orlando on Spirit is, since you can't pick your seats, your family can be split up. Happens a lot with these Orlando flights from what I heard from the flight attendant. I'm not sure what's up with their computer system. You think technology would be smarter by now, but families do get split up. You get your tickets, your boarding passes when you check in, and you could be scattered all around the airplane. Now, you can talk to a gate agent and try to get that fixed, but when you've got a full flight, who knows if that's going to be possible. So that's a risk you're taking if you choose to fly budget. Now, if you're flying with younger kids, they might do a better job at trying to keep you together or moving other people around to get you guys back together. Or if you've got adult kids like my family, it really isn't that big of a deal for us. I know there's a lot of talk and a lot of bad reputation about delays in flights. I haven't run into that since budget airlines have grown in popularity, but you do hear the horror stories about obnoxious delays. Again, I haven't run into that, but I know that it's possible depending on what city you're flying in and out of. A lot of it has to do with your city, with how big your airport is and how big of an airport you're flying into. That's a really big factor. Another thing is flight schedule. Hard to say if flight times are going to be what you want them. Frontier in Columbus does not fly out every single day. I'm sorry. Frontier, Columbus to Orlando. This is going to be what I fly the most, and so this is what I have the most experience and knowledge about. They don't fly every day. Different seasons have different flight schedules. So over the summer, they might fly 3 to 4 or even up to 7 days a week. In the winter, they're only going to fly 2 days a week. So something to think about when you're booking, especially with budget, is that you're going to be more limited as to flight schedules. With Spirit, from Columbus to Orlando, for example, it flies twice a day, every day. So there's at least some option, and we found which flight times work best for us. So that could affect your travel plans. In saving money, you have to compromise when you fly to fly cheaper. Something with Frontier and Frontier only that I've run into, here's one of our horror stories, is that flight schedules will change 6 weeks before you fly out. So you could have booked your flight 3 months before flying, and then all of a sudden you're going to get an email that they've changed your flight because they just changed the schedule. Again, I don't know why we're not beyond this. Air travel has happened for decades at this point. I don't know why you publish your schedule a year in advance or even 9 months in advance, and then 6 weeks before the flight they change the time. It's not even just canceling the flight. There's clearly enough people to fly. There's enough people that have bought seats, but then they just reschedule the flight time. So that happened to us a year ago. Ryan was on a volleyball tournament I decided to go with, so the 4 of us were flying to Orlando for said tournament. Our flight to Orlando had no problems, but coming back to Columbus, they randomly rescheduled it 6 weeks before our trip, and they bumped the flight 6 hours earlier in the day, which wasn't going to work because we were flying out after a series of games he had to play. So we had to jump through a bunch of hoops to get Frontier to get us on a different flight home. And I believe we even had to push to get our money back because they didn't have another flight in the day late enough for us to fly home. So there were just a lot of hoops to jump through. It was very challenging. I'm going to have more to say about Frontier here in just a little bit, but that's something you're going to have to watch as you're planning ahead, that flight schedules for Frontier specifically can change. Now, if you're booking more last minute, it's going to be a different story. Flight times are going to be solidified, I would hope. I haven't run into problems when you book 3 to 4 weeks out, but something to keep in mind. Something I want to acknowledge is that there are some neutral points about flying budget. You might hear rumors about rude flight crew. I've never run into an issue with flight attendants and staff, gate agents. They've all been perfectly fine. I have not had any bad interactions with them. I know that there's some bad reputation regarding that, but I've never run into any problems. I've had similar interactions with Southwest and Delta and every other airline that I have with Spirit and Frontier. So that's, I would say, don't worry about that as you book your flight. Also, I see all these videos on TikTok about crappy flights, so much turbulence, you feel like you're gonna fall out of the sky. I have never experienced that on budget. You are not flying in hand-me-down airplanes. These are perfectly safe. They meet all the safety requirements. You're not going to worry for your life and your safety normally on this flight. It's not like you're going to be calling your loved ones from the airplane wondering if you're gonna make it. No, don't jump to dramatic conclusions. That is not, 9 times out of 10, that is not gonna be a problem. You run into more issues with people not able to shoulder check on the highway than you will on a Spirit or Frontier flight. So all that to say, should you fly budget airline? There are a few things about your trip for me to recommend that you fly budget. For example, is cost your most important factor? If it's not, and your most important factor is legroom or being able to sit with your family, then flying budget is probably not going to be for you. But if cost is your most important factor and motivator when flying, then you should consider flying budget, barring that all of the other requirements fit your travel style, your lifestyle, fit everything else for your trip. So that's the first thing you need to consider. For me and my family personally, budget usually is the biggest motivating factor. We can fly alone, we don't have to sit with our family, we can suffer through legroom for a little bit. We don't need snacks, you just bring them with you. So for us, for me personally, I do move on to some of these other checklists on deciding if budget is right for me. Next is the length of your flight. Again, I typically fly Columbus to Orlando. That flight's about an hour and 45 minutes, hour and 50 minutes. That's plenty of time. Like that's a short enough flight that the legroom isn't gonna bother me. But if you're tall and your flight is over 2 hours in length, you might wanna consider not flying budget. If your flight is shorter than 2 hours, then absolutely it's fine to suffer through no snack. I say suffer, but it's not even suffer. It's fine to go without a little bit of extra legroom and have to spread your legs wide and bringing snacks with you instead of buying them on the flight. I mean, anyone can sit through. If you've sat through a college class, you can sit through this flight. It's really not that big of a deal. So if that is you, then I would still consider flying budget. And then that big point of, are you a family that needs to sit with your kids? I'm not saying don't consider budget, but recognize the risk and that you could be split up. So if you're flying with teenagers and it's not a big deal, then absolutely book that budget airline. If you have really little kids that are 3 and 4, obviously they shouldn't sit alone. The airline is gonna try to work with you to get you guys to sit together if you talk to the gauge agent and even your flight attendants. But there is that risk that one parent will have to sit a few rows up or even halfway up the plane. They do as little as possible to appease the situation so that it's not causing any problems. So that's really, in short, what I have to say about budget airlines. The other horror story that I wanted to bring up is with flying Frontier. I was coming home from my Disney College program for a really short trip. I flew up to Columbus like on a Monday and I had to be back in Florida by Wednesday. Super quick trip. I was supposed to fly out of Orlando at about 10 a.m. The flight was boarded and then there was an announcement that they had to do some routine maintenance that they neglected to do before we boarded. Sat there for an hour working on their routine maintenance. They left. Then we got another announcement that they forgot to do the safety check after doing their routine maintenance. So they then let us deboard the plane, sat around for another hour, and then we could finally get back on the plane and head to Columbus. That's really not that big of a deal. It's just super annoying when I'm going home for a very quick last minute trip and have very little time and 2 hours of it is wasted. And it's not even the routine maintenance that's the problem, it's the fact that they forgot to do their security check. Common sense. There's a lot of lives that could be lost if you don't do your safety check. So that's my beef with Frontier. The last point I want to make is and this applies for all airlines, don't be afraid to book 2 different airlines. Your arrival and your departure can be booked one way on 2 separate airlines to get you that best price. I've done that with Delta and Southwest. You can do it even with your non-budget airlines. Just airline hack, something to consider. Don't just look at the same airline. Gone are the days of paying more for a one-way. That's really not a thing. It's the same price each direction, one way or round trip. So if you want to book, if Frontier only flies one day that you are needing it, book your Frontier flight and then book Spirit back, book Southwest back. It's really up to you and what works best for your travel schedule. But if you're looking for a money-saving tip, that's probably one of the good ones that I have for you. So Let me know in the comments below if you've flown budget and if you recommend it, if you had a good experience. I'd love to hear about that. I fly the same cities every time, and so it's pretty tried and true at this point. When we go to Disney in September, we are flying Spirit again because that's what works for us. That's at the price point we want. Right now we're looking at about $100 round trip from Columbus to Orlando now that prices are starting to go up. If I were to fly Southwest, we're looking at about $200 round trip, maybe $180 depending on the day that you book. If I were to fly Delta United, we're looking at about $250 to $300 round trip, just to give you ballpark pricing for that. When I fly international, I would never ever recommend flying budget if you're flying internationally. That's really not the point of this video, but when your flight is that long, that's the beyond 2 hours thing that I was talking about earlier. Anyway, flying a different airline for that. But yeah, let me know in the comments your experience, because I would love to hear if you've had great or even bad experiences with these airlines. I'm just curious in which cities you flew in and out of. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button. I love giving you travel tips since I travel pretty regularly at this point. My family's got this house in Florida if you haven't seen any of my other videos, so I'm down in Orlando a couple times a year. I've got some big trips planned for next year, which will be exciting, give some different tips and tricks that I don't normally give since I don't do big trips all the time. So yeah, hit that subscribe button so you can keep coming back and see my other travel tips. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye everyone.